After Lil Peep passed away from an overdose, the blame was quickly placed on those around him, his friends, for being a bad influence and enabling his bad habits. And for a while, to the public, that seemed fair. But as the years passed by, new details began to surface, and the truth would unravel itself. It turned out what had been shielded to the public as a story of a rapper unable to control his demons turned out to be a much darker story, of a young, promising artist being taken advantage of. His mother, horrified, sued, and just a couple of months ago, it was settled. So in this video, we'll be going over the full story of how Lil Peep's greedy management led to his demise, and how his family finally got justice. But before we get into how Lil Peep's management exploited him, how did he manage to get signed to them in the first place? Back in 2016, Lil Peep was a buzzing SoundCloud rapper and was playing a show. In the crowd was a man named Chase Ortega. Stunned by Lil Peep's performance, he approached Peep and asked if he had a manager. Peep said no and told him he would just get by however he could, and admitted he was basically homeless. At the time, Peep was living in Skid Row, self-releasing his music on SoundCloud. Shortly after, Peep's music would be shown to the CEO of First Access Entertainment, Sarah Stennett, a longtime manager to acts such as Iggy Azalea and Zayn Malik, and a big name in the music industry. And according to her, from the moment she laid eyes on Peep and heard his music, she was obsessed. Eventually, she'd get in touch with Peep and they had a meeting. She asked him if he wanted to play stadiums and if he wanted to become a global superstar. He responded yes, and she told him she could help him with that. So in the middle of 2016, Lil Peep signed to First Access Entertainment, a deal that would change his life forever, for better and worse. At first, things were alright. First Access helped Peep with releasing his music to all platforms, selling merch, and most importantly, tours. Maybe not stadiums yet, but tours in places like Europe, Russia, and the entire country. But once Peep started seeing success and was able to make a substantial amount of money, First Access's focus shifted entirely to how much they could profit off of Peep, and took a series of measures to ensure this. The first was to relocate Peep from Los Angeles to London. First Access didn't want him to be in LA with his friends and peers, who they saw as a distraction and an obstacle in their way of profiting off of Peep. So after Peep got done with his first tour, First Access and his manager pushed Peep to move to London so that he could live a quieter life and maybe even get sober. Peep grudgingly agreed, and just like he thought, he hated it. While he was in London, he was even unhappier than he was in LA, and to him, a lot of the blame was on First Access. During his stay, he texted his manager at the time, "I'm not enjoying life. I don't want to be Lil Peep, G. I'd rather work at Starbucks. I just feel like I should be doing everything that First Access is trying to do for me, because they don't have on me, and they should be paying me to do their job." According to Peep's close friends, he was so unhappy with First Access, he was even thinking of firing them altogether. But as we all know, he never did. Just 3 days after he expressed his discontent with the new location to his manager, he was struggling with a panic attack, and instead of comforting him, his manager told him a member of First Access would be bringing him a substance. Later on, his manager denied these claims in court. And while Peep was in London, First Access sent him on one last tour. October 2nd, 2017, Lil Peep would embark on the last tour of his life, and right from the jump, things would go wrong. Peep and his manager, Chase Ortega, the man he met at that show, stopped all communication and fell out. They used a new tour manager from First Access as a middleman. Even worse, the van Peep had used for his last tour was replaced by a grimy, cramped tour bus. The touring became miserable for Peep. He was forced to sleep at weird hours and had nothing better to do but take substances and play video games, which to someone like Peep with depression didn't help. On top of that, the new tour manager hired by First Access, Belinda Mercer, who was supposed to be a reasonable person, turned out to be the opposite. Mercer was a fangirl, obsessed with getting Peep's approval, attention, and used her role as tour manager to control and manipulate him. The tour bus was flowing with substances more than ever, and things were getting dangerous. Mercer knew exactly what substances Peep loved and what got him the most high, and Peep would be in a coma-like state 24/7. In fact, Mercer's nickname by the supporting artists of the tour was the Pimp, because she would supply everyone with their substance of choice to control them. MacNed, one of Lil Peep's best friends, said, "Belinda, she's kind of a pimp. She kept us in line with the drugs, and we were like her hoes. And since she was a fan, even managed to have a relationship with Peep under the covers, if you know what I mean." Essentially, she was more like a dealer than a tour manager, and it only got worse. On October 25th, 21 days before Peep's death, his tour was almost jeopardized because of Mercer. While they were crossing the Canadian border, everyone in the bus was told by Border Patrol they had to leave. Mercer was apprehended and interrogated, and they had to wait 7 hours to cross the border. In the end, Mercer was held back even longer, and they had to go on without her. Yup, you heard me. They had to leave the manager of the tour behind because she got caught with illegal substances. But Mercer would rejoin the tour the next night. Years later, in a deposition, Mercer admitted that the authorities had found illegal substances on her, but they weren't hers, they were the tours, implying that the substances were Peep's. However, Peep's mother came with receipts, and when Mercer was confronted with text messages in which she allegedly asked Peep how many blue, referring to type of substance, Mercer pled the fifth. And of course, later on in court, First Access claims they gave Mercer a stern talk for giving out substances. However, the CEO of First Access, Sarah, had engaged in activities similar to what Mercer had been doing. You see, unlike what First Access claimed in court, Sarah Stennett, the CEO, was on board with all of this. According to Peep's mom and those around him, she, quote, fostered, promoted, and encouraged substance use to maintain control over Lil Peep and his tours. For example, on a tour stop in London, Peep and Stennett had dinner, and he was given a bag of substances by Stennett as a gift. However, later, through a lawyer, Stennett denied that she offered substances to Peep and said she was merely trying to comfort Peep by offering him substances that she had no intention of delivering. But once again, Peep's mother had receipts, and in court, Peep's mom showed text messages in which Stennett had contacted Peep about what substances he wanted, writing, "I'm about to land at JFK. I have 2 and 4. Referring to 2 doses of substances she had for Peep, which basically confirmed everybody on First Access was on the same page with how to control Peep, exploit his addiction. 11 days later after the border incident, Peep met up with one of his rapper friends, Fat Nick, who hooked him up with a ton of substances for his birthday. Once again, First Access didn't try to limit Peep's use. Instead, they signed Fat Nick. At this point, and even at certain points prior, Peep wanted to quit the tour, but his managers ignored his pleas and pushed him onto the tour, city after city, plying and propping him up on all sorts of substances. Sometimes he'd show up to a show a complete mess, stammering, vomiting, and looked like he was about to pass out. But as you can see, he continued to perform. At the time, he was being applauded for being professional and keeping his word. But looking back, he probably should have canceled some of the shows for his own safety and well-being. And things only got worse. Peep's final show was a nightmare. First Access had failed to get him a proper venue, which he vented about to his mom on FaceTime, and it was the last time they would ever speak. In fact, in his final show in El Paso, Texas, Mercer encouraged him to take an excessive amount of a certain substance so he could cancel the show and collect insurance money for being sick. It was so normalized at this point that people didn't even care, but one of his friends took a video in case something went wrong, worried for him. In the end, the promoters got mad that they tried to cancel the show, and Mercer forced Peep to post a video to social media showing he was fine, and then made him perform. Peep was already depressed and going through mental issues, so forcing him to tour and enabling his addiction wasn't gonna end well, and it didn't. Eventually, this lack of concern for Peep's health led to his demise, and on November 15th, 2017, Lil Peep was found on his tour bus deceased, all alone, lying by himself. Earlier that day, he was hanging out with some fans before the show, and there was enough evidence on the tour bus to say he had died from substances on that bus. Years later, it was revealed that the night before, Mercer had begged the local tour staff for heavy substances. When Peep was found unresponsive, attempts were made to revive Peep, but he wouldn't come alive because he was laying there for hours at that point. At 3 p.m. that day, he was in Tucson, Arizona, chilling with his friends from his group, and almost an hour later, he started acting funny. So his friends moved him to a couch and tried to keep talking with him, but Peep kept passing out, and after being kicked and shaken, he wouldn't wake up. They thought he was in a really deep sleep because he was snoring, but this was actually him overdosing. His friends told other people on the bus, but in the environment that management had created, it was normal, so no one did anything. In fact, Mercer had even seen Peep at 5:30 and couldn't wake him up herself, but she decided not to call the police or an ambulance and decided to run a personal errand. It wasn't until 3 hours later, when they realized he was frozen, his skin was pale, his lips blue, and that he had no pulse, that an ambulance was called. It arrived 8 minutes later, but it was too late to save him. He was pronounced dead on the scene. His management, as well as the others on the bus, had watched him slowly pass away in front of their eyes. Immediately after, the manager who Peep had fallen out with, Chase Ortega, tweeted, "Been waiting for this call for a year," explaining he didn't even expect Peep to last this long. Following his death, Peep was mourned by friends and family. His best friend took to Instagram Live crying, and there was an outpour of support coming from his fans and other musicians. Post Malone spoke about him.
He was really such a talented dude, and he was gonna change music for never, and it sucks, dude. It sucks.
XXXTentacion mourned him, and even artists like Juice WRLD supported him. And Peep's music briefly surged in popularity with the single Awful Things entering the Billboard 100. But the thing is, practically none of these details I just shared with you were available to the public at the time of his death. So rumors about Peep's death began circulating, and First Access knew this, so they had to quickly find a way to cover up their negligence to the public, as well as his family. They decided that Lil Peep's friends, the ones that they had tried to move him across the world from, were responsible, and swiftly crafted a narrative that Peep had passed away due to bad influences around him. But those that were closest to him knew the truth. Lil Tracy, Lil Peep's best friend, said,
"I'm willing to die for what my friend died for. You might not even know what that means, but I know what that means. I'ma know, and he would know. And I'm gonna call you out.
First Access would go to further lengths to cover up their negligence. Shortly before Peep passed, he signed a deal through First Access to star in a movie. And after he passed, First Access decided to go through with it. But with a twist, they produced a documentary on Peep's life with the same filmmakers. It was a quite moving and emotional watch, except everything surrounding Peep's death was extremely biased because First Access had financed the documentary. Sarah Stennett was even listed as a producer herself, and 100% of the blame was placed on Peep's friends. And frankly, it worked. For a couple of years, they tricked everyone, including his mother, but it didn't last for long. At first, Peep's mom wasn't happy with his friends, publicly calling them out for multiple things, like alleging they had stolen his clothes and more. But a couple years after Peep passed, his mother had done her own homework and found out who was really responsible for Lil Peep's death, and it led her to none other than First Access. So in October of 2019, Liza Womack, Lil Peep's mother, filed a 372-page lawsuit against First Access Entertainment in Los Angeles' Superior Court, claiming wrongful death, negligence, and a breach of contract for unspecified damages. The defendants were Lil Peep's manager and his tour manager, Belinda Mercer. And the suit laid out the mind-blowing details laid out earlier in this video that were hidden from the public until then. Furthermore, Peep's mother also filed a lawsuit claiming that First Access owed her $4 million that was owed to Peep in royalties, and pleaded to the court that she needed intervention as soon as possible for her own son's legacy, as her working relationship with Peep's label was dysfunctional. To show you how dysfunctional, Smoke a Sack, Lil Peep's main producer and one of his best friends, honored Sarah Stennett on National Women's Day, stating, "Today is National Women's Day, and I can't say how much I appreciate these particular women. My mentor, who's also the godmother to my daughter," and posted a picture of him and Sarah Stennett. The woman's Peep mother was suing for her part in Peep's death. This whole time, Peep's mom was working tirelessly to release his music to all platforms, which involved clearing samples and other business dealings, something she had no experience in. Following Peep's mother's suit, First Access countersued, claiming that Peep's mother selling merch was a breach of contract and tried to get their charges dropped. But the judge sided with Peep's mother and upheld each and every court accusation, and a date for the jury and trial was set. However, despite the trail of evidence, First Access was a legitimate company, and the lawsuit wasn't going to be an easy win. Peep's mom's biggest hurdle was trying to get over the duty questions, which meant, did First Access have a duty to prevent Lil Peep from obtaining or accessing substances? And according to a legal expert, it was possible because a court could reasonably decide that by providing a person with an addiction illegal substances, they endangered his life and brought responsibility upon themselves. And according to another legal expert, if it was proved in court, it could have legal ramifications much worse than millions of dollars. There could be criminal charges for everyone involved if the lawsuit showed they were facilitating bootleg substances without prescription, which they were. In fact, the same legal expert said Lil Peep's case was very similar to Michael Jackson's death and famous lawsuit, except his management had hired a doctor. Peep's management was much dirtier. They had hired Mercer to do their dirty work and were handing him substances under the table, which would likely influence a jury to find them responsible and guilty for Peep's passing. Following the lawsuit, First Access denounced the suit, saying, "The claim that First Access Entertainment or any of its employees was somehow responsible for, complicit in, or contributed to Peep's passing is categorically untrue." They also said the lawsuit was groundless and offensive and entirely baseless, misguided, and without merit, and even said it was 100% Peep's fault, saying, "It is extremely disappointing that Peep's mother would file this meritless lawsuit since she is well aware of the numerous efforts made by First Access and Chase Ortega to steer her son away from his concerning lifestyle choices. Unfortunately, in spite of our best efforts, he was an adult who made his own decisions and opted to follow a different, more destructive path." In fact, Stennett even said that Peep's death made her realize how important the work she was doing was, because she said she was saving lives. In an interview, she said, "It restored my faith in a higher power," adding that their relationship made me understand there's a purpose to what I'm doing. It's not just music, it's a much bigger responsibility. But these media trained and damage control statements being made to the public by First Access were simply false, and the judge saw right through their lies and disagreed, saying, "There's no question there's a tribal issue as to whether Mercer provided the substances or not," the judge said. "If you're going to create an environment like that where substances are flowing and you're providing it, and hey, you actually don't have any life-saving device or any Narcan to help people who are going to have a problem with those substances, it seems to me you are creating a very dangerous situation here," and supported Peep's mother. "I'm not saying that's what happened, but that's what Womack alleges," the judge said. The fact that the defendants didn't give a single adequate protection for that environment, I think that could add up to causation right there. So despite First Access Entertainment's attempts to get the case dismissed, Peep's mom wouldn't budge and said, "I want justice for Gus. That's why I'm doing this. Whatever form it takes, what I'm looking for is for people to be held accountable for their behavior." And it was something she had to do as a mother, and so that other artists couldn't be exploited. This is something I must do as a mother. I feel very concerned that they not be exploited. What Gus had to live through is actually horrifying to me, and I'm sure he's not the only person his age in this situation. In 2021, a fan on Reddit commented, "Damn, this is nerve-wracking just to watch. Can't imagine what it must be like for Liza, Peep's mother." And they were right, because that same year, Peep's mom did an interview where she revealed she'd almost died twice during the lawsuit, stating, "I've had 2 strokes, and I'm not going to die until I take care of this matter. I'm going to live. I have a mission." And after 4 years, on February 14th of 2023, Lil Peep's mother and First Access Entertainment had settled his wrongful death lawsuit outside of court, and a public judgment was never given. Part of the deal were that terms of the settlement were to be undisclosed, but on Instagram, most of it was announced. Today, Gus's music came home. From this day forward, his music will be in the care of his mother, brother, and no one else. It is a solemn moment for us as we reflect on the struggles of our past 5 years. We're grateful to all the fans, friends, professionals, and family who stood by us. We were all permanently changed by Gus's death. We know he should be here in the world with all of us, creating, making, whatever he was inspired to make, but he is not. So we will protect his music with all of our strength. We look forward to continuing to release Gus's music. This is a very important day for us. So the lawsuit had been settled for an unknown amount of money, probably millions, and First Access was forced to give up the rights to all of Lil Peep's music to his family. And the event definitely gave his family and loved ones some type of closure, as a couple of years earlier, Lil Peep's mother explained how she'd feel after the case was settled. Closure is not the word that describes it. If people are held accountable for their actions, I will feel that justice has been done. You learn to live with the pain, and you're a different person, because when your child dies, the person that you were dies too. But I will be glad, and I hope to feel satisfaction. But many fans were disappointed, as although there would be a lot more releases of Lil Peep's music, and First Access Entertainment could no longer make money off of him, no one was personally held responsible for the neglect that clearly occurred on this tour, and it never ended up being the precedent-setting case his mom originally wanted it to be, and had the potential for. So in the end, justice was served, and Lil Peep's mother could finally feel a bit satisfied that her son didn't die for nothing. But that doesn't change how sad the entire story of Lil Peep's passing is. And if he was treated as a person instead of a commodity, who knows where he'd be at today. My name is Rashad Bashir, thanks for watching, and have a nice day.